Loyne, who's gracious enough to work with us. If everybody can give him a round of applause. Here he is, one more time. Additionally, our coffee today came from Lucas Coffee, which is an independent roaster here in town, so be sure to check them out on Bay Street. We also want to thank all of our sponsors who contributed or are here today exhibiting. Make sure you stop by their tables and see what they have to say about water quality or things you can do here in the Lakes region. And then additionally, if you did not have an opportunity to sign up to become a monitor or to join your association, then please make sure you stop by the association tables before you leave today. And I wanted to say thank you also to all of our speakers and panelists. Will you please give a big round of applause for Dr. Haney, Warren Muir, and Bob Craycraft. So this is a historic event to have all the associations together up here with all of our lake experts. So this is the time that we're going to be more involved. You can, pass your questions up. We're going to try to answer them. And each of the different representatives from the lake associations are going to be sharing with you the quality of the lake that you might call your home water body. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Don Kretschner. Thank you for moderating today, Don. Round of applause. And we're going to pass the microphones back and forth.
Is this one on?
Yep. So thanks a lot for all the questions. We have a lot of questions here, and I'm trying to group them, and I'm trying to get through them all. We won't get through them all. And so what I think I'd like to propose is that the ones that we don't get through, we'll keep the cards. We'll try to put together kind of a frequently asked questions thing that'll be on the Wentworth Watershed website, so we can get kind of answers to all the questions. And we may ask some of the panelists to help us out with some of the answers before we post that. But we'll try to get that. If we don't get to your question, all hope is not lost. So because we had such a wealth of questions left over from the first session, I'm gonna hold on to those for just a little while and kind of introduce the panelists from the second session, which are our local lake associations, and sort of have each of them give us a quick synopsis on what's happening in their local lake association and how that sort of would interplay with the issue of cyanobacteria. So we're going to start with Julie, since she's at the end.
Hello again. Hi, I'm Julie Brown. I'm the Executive Director for the Wentworth Watershed Association. And to share a little bit about what's going on Wentworth and Crescent Lake, in general, the water quality is really good. That's a good report. Wentworth has some low dissolved oxygen levels down deep because it's a deeper lake. We do have phosphorus present in our lakes, shocking. And what we were really trying to do as a lake association is working to mitigate the inflow of nitrogen and phosphorus coming into the water body. So we're doing that in several ways, which have been represented here through the Soak Up the Rain project, where we're working with homeowners to infiltrate water and to look for problem areas on their property. We are working in cooperation with the town and the Department of Environmental Services to tackle bigger projects. So we have just been awarded the 4th phase of grants with them for another $120,000 to tackle a couple of prime areas that in the watershed that are contributing to nitrogen runoff and stormwater issues. We're doing construction for phase 3 coming up in the fall. So you can learn more about that in our upcoming annual report. And we also are working with education, invasive species. We're still doing a lot of milfoil work. And our goal is to get everybody who is in the watershed to be involved and be part of the solution. And this is one of the ways that right here today is how we're trying to get you involved. So in general, water quality is good. Yes, there is cyanobacteria present in both Crescent Lake, Lake Wentworth, and in Sargent's Pond. We have had some blooms, but not extensive, and we need to know more about them. We need to check for toxins, we need testers, we need watchers, and so please sign up at our table.
Thanks, Julie. Next up is Keith Simpson from Rust Pond.
Thank you for all being here today. I'm not a scientist. I am a proud monitor of Rust Pond's water. I've been doing it for about 20 years now. Rust Pond was one of the leaders in the area. We go back to 1985. I was brought into the program. My mentor, Ed Webb, whose daughter is here today, and he's still around too. At any rate, we go out. It's all about the people that I go with. It's a lot of fun. We go out 3 times during the summer, and we hop in a boat. If the boat's not available, 2 of us can do it in a canoe. I noticed one of the pictures that I saw that had a couple of people sampling from a canoe. It's a bit of a challenge. If you've got a cooler with a bunch of bottles in it, and you've got all kinds of equipment, but we didn't capsize, and it was a great time. What we get every year, our program is a little different than what's been mentioned because we work with DES and we don't work with UNH, but we get a report like this, which is just chock full of information about, and we have graphs on the back, which are trends, which is what we're really looking for. Is how over 35 years of sampling our phosphorus or nitrate, nitrous. Let's say I'm not a scientist, so I can't. But there's recommendations that are also given in the report. But my takeaway here is that it's really a great way to get out on the water with other people. And have some fun and do something really, really good. And you get to feel there's equipment associated with this that here I'll do a little show and tell. This has been mentioned before. It's called a Secchi disc, and this gets lowered into the water until you can't see it, and then you pull it back up. It was invented by Angelo Secchi in 1875, so it's been used for a long time. I think Angelo went on to create a bunch of sub shops in Maine and New Hampshire.
Little known fact.
Had a little piece. Anyway, if there's any questions you have about monitoring, if you're interested in getting into that, what's involved, I'd be glad to answer those questions. Yeah.
You've done the monitoring, but there's also been a variety of actions that you've taken, and your monitoring is showing improvements.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, thank you.
This is worth it.
Thank you. Actually, at our table, the Rust Pond table, I've printed up about 25 of these, and please help yourself. Take a look at them. And you can see the graphs on the back you can see the improvements, and part of that is being able at our annual meeting to be able to tell the other residents of the pond what's happening, what you can do to maybe alleviate, or in terms of septic systems or runoff and so forth. It's a valuable tool. We had in our history at one point we noticed a slight spike in phosphorus levels at one area that we were sampling, and we discovered there was a horse farm that had started in the watershed very close to where the water was coming in, had a huge pile of manure, and put 2 and 2 together. DES was able to step in and talk to the person with a horse farm, talk about best practices, and basically alleviate the situation. And we've been on a good trend since then. So.
Great. Thanks, Keith. So we're going to skip by Warren, but not on, Warren already told us a little bit about what he's been doing, and his importance to kind of furthering the cause in Winter Harbor should not be underestimated. And I noticed that Steve Wingate is out here in the audience too, or at least I thought I saw him earlier. He's done a lot of the Winter Harbor work as well. But since we already heard from Warren, oh, there's Steve. Since we already heard from Warren, we're going to have Pat Tarpey tell us a little bit about what's going on in Winnipesaukee.
So I'm Pat Tarpey, Executive Director of the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. So we are the Lake Association for Winnipesaukee. We are dedicated solely to protecting its water quality and natural resources. We've been involved with UNH's Lake Slay Monitoring Program probably for 30 years. We have over 30 years of data on the lake, which does give us that long-term trend. But because the lake is so large and because of its shape and its complexity, managing the lake is a little bit more of a challenge. And as Dr. Haney mentioned, we've taken a sub-watershed approach to look at the lake at what we're calling the sub-watershed level, but those different areas of the lake, Meredith Bay, Alton Bay, Wolfeboro Bay Inlet, and we are doing management planning at that level. And so we've completed 5 so far. We're currently working in Wolfeboro Bay and Winter Harbor. But we do a watershed analysis, look at what's happening on the land, identify those sites that are contributing stormwater runoff or erosion, and then come up with an action plan to fix it. So far, we have lake-wide over 500 sites identified, and we know we haven't even touched on all of them because mostly those are public sites. So there's a lot more on residential properties that we don't go on because they're private. So anyways, I want to thank everyone who signed up for water quality monitoring. Wolfeboro Bay is an area where we haven't had monitoring for about the last 10 years, so we really need to get that going. So I look forward to working with you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. And next up is Larry Gill. He's going to tell us a little bit about Mirror Lake.
Good afternoon. I live on Mirror Lake. It's about a little less than a 400-acre lake located on the, and it connects up with Lake Winnipesaukee. There is a hydraulic connection there. We've been sampling that lake back since almost approaching 50 years now. We have some information going back to 1978, and the data, certainly in terms of total phosphorus, shows an increase as you would expect as the homeowners came in and the lake became more of a destination spot. So what we have seen is in 2007, 2008, we had a cyanobacteria outbreak. The phosphorus levels were fairly high. We were able to get a 319 grant, establish a management plan done by Geosyntac, and we've implemented a number of recommendations on that plan, one which was address overflooding on Lang Pond Road. I won't say we corrected that problem, but we enlarged the culverts and substantially reduced the amount of overtopping and the introduction of sediments and phosphorus into the lake from that. We did some work in and around the one boat ramp that we have on 109. We have a very active weed watcher program, lake host program. We have no invasive plants in our lake as of this time, and we're pretty proud of that. So we have seen a reduction in phosphorus levels across the lake. It's not statistically at where we would like it, but we have seen a reduction, and we have not had any cyanobacteria outclosures since that time.
Great, thanks, Larry. And yeah, just on a side note, I was able to go out and do some sampling with Larry last fall, and Larry has a long career in doing this kind of monitoring down in Massachusetts, and I learned a lot going out with him. If you get a chance to go out sampling with Larry, I recommend it. It was a really nice day on the water. Okay, so thanks to everybody. I'm going to ask some specific questions for the townsfolk, and then I'm going to circle back and throw out some questions related to cyanobacteria, to some of the experts from earlier. There's a whole group of questions that have to do with phosphorus loading, specific phosphorus projects, specific sources of phosphorus, and I'm going to kind of lump those together and give kind of a quick answer, because we're not going to have time to get through them all. And that answer is that there is probably not a scenario in any of our lakes where any additional phosphorus will make the situation better. So, you know, every little source counts. You know, I always like to say it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. No source is too small to sort of deal with, and everything contributes. And for large measure, cyanobacteria don't care where the phosphorus came from. They just are willing to accept it wherever it came from, whether it's from stormwater, lawn fertilizer, septic systems, you know, municipal wastewater. It doesn't really matter to the cyanobacteria where it came from. Phosphorus control is absolutely critical here, and that goes across all of the lakes and all the watersheds in Wolfeboro. So I kind of answered that question just because it's a huge pile of cards here. And we'll try to get some more detailed answers around that as we go forward. There's also a number of questions, and I'm going to throw this one to Keith, but there's a number of questions about kind of specific Wolfeboro projects going on. And one of them is the boat ramp on Rust Pond. There's questions about is the town moving quick enough, and since Keith is a resident over there, maybe he can give a little insight as to what's going on there.
I'd be glad to comment on that. I think this is the project is like a lot of projects that have been done or are underway in the town. There are a lot of roadblocks that all of a sudden crop up. There were grants involved with this project that some of them ran out of time because all of a sudden there are issues having to do with property ownership that came up. There's a piece of property that looked like nobody owned it in this area. It creates a conundrum for our town, our elected officials, as well as our employees to deal with, our public works and planning people, and they're working through it, but all of a sudden things have cropped up. We're hoping, though, that our goal with it is and everybody drives past this spot on Rust Pond. It's the most visible spot on Rust Pond in Wolfeboro, driving down Route 28. Our plan, the plan is to make it for just canoes and kayaks. It's not going to be safe, especially, or suitable for backing in power boats. And the ultimate goal is it will be a nicer, safer place for people to be able to enjoy Rust Pond, which I do every day. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Keith. So along those lines, I'm going to throw this one to Warren, and he may have some input on it. And this is related to a specific project, some stormwater improvements in Winter Harbor, which I think are upstream of where you live in Whitegate. And so there's some concern, and it may be a misunderstanding that the stormwater improvements are going to increase stormwater inputs into Winter Harbor. My sense is, at least my understanding is that that's not the case, but you may have some more information on that.
I mean, there are concerns about storm water runoff that is coming down from the development up Forest Road and then coming down the hill and flowing into the lake and carrying sediment. Some is right along Forest Road, and there's concern about stormwater that is coming down and washing across Cary Beach. And the town voters voted to support some mitigation actions along Partridge Drive, which has got about 5 different sources coming on down. And contrary to increasing the stormwater, it really is there to slow it down. The rain gardens, trying as much as possible to have water percolate into the ground rather than flow down the hill and carry phosphorus-laden and other nutrients in sediment directly into the lake. So it was just the opposite.
Great.
And so there's been engineering designs done, and all the effort is to do just the reverse.
Thanks, Warren. Okay, so here's a question for Pat, and this fits in well with what Dr. Haney was talking about aerosols and the different basins. And so this question is: Are the other towns around the lake active in addressing this issue? Wolfeboro can't do this alone, and that fits right in with what Pat's mission is.
That's right. So, yes, the good news is the other towns are involved. For each area of the lake that we've already worked on watershed management plans, the towns have provided great support. The town of Meredith is very proactive now on addressing sites that were identified in the management plan, and in fact, I'll give them a plug. On June, I think it's 18th, they're holding an information fair. It's a 2-hour information fair on stormwater practices that residents can do. So if you're over Meredith Way, it's open, 2 hours, you come, you go, but they'll have examples of all different types of things that you can see that you can do on your own home. We're working with Meredith on some stormwater improvement projects that we just got grants for because they have a completed plan. We're working with the town of Wolfeboro right now on a septic system initiative. So Wolfeboro is our guinea pig, but we're going to have a toolbox that when that's completed, any town can apply that in their own municipality with how to deal with septic systems. And as I said, we're working with Wolfeboro, Tuftonboro, and Wolfeboro on a management plan. And in fact, we have another 319 grant we got that will be implementing projects in Wolfeboro, Meredith, and I guess it is all Meredith. But so it's a $125,000 grant. The towns are putting in money. So, and I see some folks from New Durham and Alton. So Merry Meeting River has taken it, the citizens down there have taken it upon themselves to do a watershed management plan for the Merry Meeting River, which then flows into Alton Bay.
Okay, thanks, Pat. So the next one's for Julie and/or Warren, and it's going to be a shameless plug. If we see a bloom, if we see a bloom, how do we sample it and where can we test it? So might there be some training coming up?
Why, Don, what a good question. Yes, one of the main reasons we want you here today was to offer an opportunity. We have Hillary Snook coming up from EPA to do a training at the Brewster Boathouse, beautiful venue, and it is free training, and we want to get as many people trained from as many lakes as possible so we can get people out watching and monitoring. So if you don't have a boat or you feel like you don't have the gumption to actually pull water samples, you can watch the shoreline. You can pay attention to what's happening and make phone calls. There's lots of ways to be involved. However, the water sampling, you get trained how to do it. It is not genius work. You grab some water samples and you bring it in, and the Wentworth Watershed Association has just purchased a cyanoscope, a bunch of the things that you saw Dr. Haney using. And so we actually have the ability to look at things. So you bring the water samples in, we'll look at it, the ones that are suspicious, we'll send off and get tested immediately with help from the town. So that's kind of the goal, is that you're the ones who are the users of these lakes. You're the ones who see things. I'm stuck in the office most of the time, but you guys can get out there and sample the water, look around, and let us know what's happening. So please, please, please sign up for this. Even if you're not sure if you're interested, you won't know until you come to the training. Shameless plug.
Yeah, good, good. And, you know, if we're lucky, we'll have Dr. Haney there as well, or someone else from UNH, and you'll get to see Dr. Haney in his natural habitat, which is the lab.
Everybody's welcome to that training, but we want to know whether you're coming or not, because if we have more people than one session can handle, we're going to have 2 sessions, and we need to plan that along.
Right. And
the other thing I should mention is that you will get at that session is we're drafting up a communications protocol. So if you happen to see something and you think it might be a bloom, you know, what do you do? I mean, who do you talk to? I mean, who do you do? And how do people get appropriately informed? And we will have that at those sessions as well.
right. And don't be intimidated. This is designed for citizens. You don't have to know anything ahead of time. Don't say, "Oh, I don't know about this sciencey stuff." It's for everybody, and there's something that everybody can do. Okay, back to questions. So this one is for Dr. Haney. Can cyanobacteria be at toxic levels but not be visible?
The answer to that is yes. And one of the reasons is that we don't fully understand this, but at times at least half of the toxins in the water or more are in the dissolved form. So it leaks out of these. Part of it we think is happening as they're being eaten by zooplankton. It's referred to in the literature as sloppy feeding. In other words, as they eat, they break apart these cells, and some of the contents go out into the water. So at that point, you've got then the cells, which you can see, but the other part you can't see. So it can be, in fact, in some ways, it's worse than if they're in the cells. For drinking water, it's better if they're in the cells because there are ways to precipitate the cells out to get rid of those before the drinking water goes through, but it's much harder in the dissolved form. For swimming, it does create then a difficulty knowing by whether you can trust your eyes. And the thing here is if you're swimming in an area where relatively recently there's been a bloom, it's probably better not to. In other words, there is some lingering effects, and that could be one of them, that after the bloom is gone, a lot of this toxin ends up in the water. It decays with time. And there have been some studies that are really interesting because some bacteria can actually break down. It's like us eating a steak, you know, for a bacterium getting a peptide, which is like a small part of a protein, there's a lot of energy there. So, but only some bacteria can do it. So it's very difficult to predict. It's somewhere between, say, 1 and 2 or 3 weeks. Almost all traces of the toxin usually are gone if the cells are gone. So it takes time, but that's a good question. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give this one to Bob. Does boating affect the spread of cyanobacteria? And there was another question in here related to, do wildlife, ducks, things like that, spread cyanobacteria around? Bob, maybe you can have a shot at this, and you know anyone else can chime in if they need to.
I'm not, and this is from lake to lake, I take it.
I think that's the way I took it, yeah.
Okay. I mean, the cyanobacteria are really small and are going to be transported. I mean, if the habitat is there that can support them, they're probably going to get there one means or another. I wouldn't say it's the boat's fault for getting them there. I mean, wildlife move from location to location. Some of these things have small forms that might blow along. So, you know, I guess anything's possible, but the reality is the cyanobacteria are pretty ubiquitous in nature. You're going to find them in any water body. It's the densities that are going to vary, particularly depending upon the conditions in that water body. So I wouldn't attribute it to the boat per se. It's basically the conditions within that water body.
I agree.
Well, good. Now, because you guys did such a good job with this one, I may even answer this one for you. Can Lake Association fund master's students at UNH? I think the answer is yes.
Not only master's students, but just students. One of the things we have a number of students who take on projects now. The university has maybe changed a bit in the last few years in that we recognize more and more sort of hands-on experience as equivalent to classroom. So we have in our department a course that's called 600. And 600 is for experience. So if students go out and they have an educational experience, and in some cases if they write that up, they can even use that as a capstone course. It can be to their benefit. The biggest problem is they have to give up taking a job for the summer, working wherever, maybe raking leaves or whatever they do. And so giving them money to contribute to this is a win-win, a win for you, but also a win for them that they're doing something much more educational. So it's a good, in my mind, a good use of money is to get students working. And master students is also really good. If you want a greater in-depth detailed study, of course, then you can get that. And for some problems like the one we did on the deep layers, that did require a couple of years to get as far as she has. But it's also the beginning. So if we had now an undergrad who could follow up on that and look at layers in different systems, see are they toxic and what influences whether they come to the surface and cause a bloom or not. I mean, we're just beginning to learn about them. Yeah.
Great. So while you have the mic, does a bloom feed itself?
Does it feed itself?
Yeah.
So, in a way it does. That's a really interesting question.
And I'm going to add to that a little bit. Can a bloom of one species result in, help feed a bloom of another species?
Sure. I mean, one of the, back 20, 30, 40 years ago, Cyanobacteria blooms, called algal blooms at that time, were known to be bad because they would get such a high density of biomass at the surface. When that died and went to the bottom, it created anoxia, right? The lack of oxygen. Well, when that occurs, of course, as everyone here probably on the panel knows, that allows then the phosphorus, when it's anoxic, when there's no oxygen, the phosphorus then comes out of the sediments and comes up into the water. So one species could easily die off and pave the way for another species to come in and use that phosphorus. So sure, they're all enjoying that bounty of discovery of phosphorus in the bottom of the water.
Okay.
Also, Gliotrichia, which we had in Winter Harbor, it gets its phosphorus from the sediment, but it's one of the forms of cyanobacteria that can fix nitrogen. So it that's part of why it's floating on up to get nitrogen from the air.
I also wanted to add to that because you think of oxygen as a requirement for all living things, but of course it's not. And for the first not quite billion years, but it was at least 500 million years, it's estimated, that cyanobacteria were the only photosynthetic organisms on Earth. Much of that time when the Earth first formed, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. So the fact that they can tolerate low oxygen, that's their old home, is without oxygen. What happened is when they got a more efficient way of using the sun's energy, releasing oxygen, that was more efficient because now they were able to split water and take the energy from that. That created a problem. If you'd have been around at that time, you'd probably seen little signs saying stop oxygen pollution in the air, because they were giving off a pollutant which was oxygen. So they changed the atmosphere to an atmosphere that now allowed us to evolve. So the history is quite interesting. But when we go to the bottom of a lake, what we at times can see is history. This is the old world that they once had, and now there are just little pieces of it left. That's at least how I look at it.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so here's one related to milfoil, which is, part of the mission of almost all the lake associations around here. There's milfoil in a number of our lakes. Is there a correlation between the increase in milfoil and other underwater vegetation with the growth of cyanobacteria? Anyone can, you can take it since you have the mic? Or?
So is there a connection between cyanobacteria and
milfoil?
Well, you know, theoretically there would be, but maybe not the one you're thinking of. The milfoil is a good competitor for nutrients with all phytoplankton. So when you release phosphorus in the water, it goes somewhere because everyone wants it. And milfoil is pretty good at taking it up. That's one of the reasons it's a problem. It grows fast, uses a lot. And so what's been found, at least in, first maybe discovered in the Netherlands, was that if you cut away the vegetation, whether it's milfoil or other macrophytes, you release phosphorus for the cyanobacteria and other phytoplankton. So there's this competition back and forth. So when you have lots of milfoil, chances are there's less light, but also less nutrients available for the cyanobacteria. So if you poison off the milfoil, for example, that sets the stage for the release of phosphorus and light to whatever's there, and often it's cyanobacteria ready to take up those resources.
Yeah.
You can fire me right after this.
Okay, I have one more question, then I'm going to, then we'll end this part of it. We asked the question. I asked the question before about drawdown. We ran out of time before the break. Does drawdown have an impact on cyanobacteria? And we do drawdowns in a lot of lakes around here every winter. Some years we do bigger drawdowns. Is that potentially an issue? Good, bad, indifferent, not a factor?
Well, the effects of drawdown, you know, we've been arguing this ever since I took up limnology, really, because it was used often to reduce the macrophytes, right? Because you expose their roots and then they die off, and the theory is that cleanses the lake of the macrophytes. But of course, most of us know that it doesn't always do that. It tends to promote a type that can withstand drying and winters, and so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. With cyanobacteria, I don't know any studies that have actually looked at its impact directly on cyanobacteria, but it's a good question. My guess is it's going to be variable too, but I don't know the answer. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'd like to thank all the panelists. I mean, and thanks to everyone for listening and on a beautiful day, and hopefully there's still enough of it left for everybody. I'm just going to give the panelists an opportunity. If there's something that we didn't ask you that you think is a burning issue that you really want to get off your chest while you still have a microphone and an audience, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do it at this point. Anyone have anything? Or did we ask all the right questions?
Shameless plug. Join your lake association. If you're in our watershed, join our lake association, join New Hampshire Lakes Association. Power is in the knowledge. We share information. There's plenty of volunteer opportunities, from stuffing envelopes to sampling water, sampling streams, helping with grants. I know there's 1.5 of us that work at the Wentworth Watershed Association as employees. It takes a village of volunteers, and I think that goes for all of the associations. We need your help, and we need your membership dollars.
Yep. And I'll just follow up. I know that Wentworth Watershed mentioned soak up the rain assessments. So Lake Winnipesaukee Association is also offering that service this summer. So we'll be focusing a lot in Tuftonboro and Wolfeboro because it's related to the management plan. But if you would like a voluntary assessment done of your property where someone will come out and just walk it, and you can point out issues you know of, and they'll give you some simple do-it-yourself things that you can take care of. So if you're interested, you can sign up at the Winnipesaukee table for that. Thanks.
Okay. I got one more.
Oh, good, good.
This does not affect only shoreline owners. Almost everybody here is in the watershed of one or more of these lakes. And so there are opportunities for all of you to help address these issues. And there are a lot of simple, quick low-cost options that are available for all of us.
Okay, can we get a round of applause for our panelists?
I'm going to do the fastest wrap-up you've ever heard. I'm going to speak fast so then you can all grab some food and head home. I want to thank everybody for their attentiveness, their questions, and being here. So what did we learn today? Ecology. It's our house. Let's take care of our house. Let's reduce phosphorus. Cyanobacteria preceded us. Now we have to live with it. It ranges from small strands to square miles. It needs warmth. It loves to feed off the bottom of the lake and then travel upwards. It's a traveler. It's dangerous to small pets and children. And our climate is trending to be like North Carolina. That scared me a lot. There's a lot of neurotoxin and liver toxin correlations. We're studying loons and doing blood work on loons to see how cyano works its way up the food web. Do not boil lake water. Airborne aerosol, lots of studying being done, and next year we'll probably get into updates on that. The BMAA and amino acid, the mistaken identity syndrome, I found that fascinating. And I'm going to put in a personal plug. If you must fertilize, never, ever have fertilizer that has the middle number anything other than 0, because you're just adding phosphorus to our environment. Big takeaway, phosphorus is a no-no. Anything that's traveling is probably carrying it. Don't add with phosphorus fertilizers. Most importantly, next year, we all are going to be citizen science partners, and we're going to learn what we've all done together. And I hope all of you will join us either just to be informed or to join in and do different things. As Julie said, all kinds of help is always needed. So I want to thank staff, volunteers, speakers, and thank you for feedback cards too. Appreciate all of you being here.